Before we begin tonight's story, I want you to imagine this a quiet trailer on the edge of town. A single father doing his best to hold life together. And one rainy night that changed everything. Not with a loud crash or a dramatic twist, but with a soft knock on the door and a child who had nowhere else to go. What unfolded next wasn't luck or fate. It was something far more human. Settle in. Take a breath, this is a story you won't forget. A single dad janitor cared for a sick girl. Every day, one day, 6 SUVs pulled up to his house. The engines came first, low-heavy, vibrating through the thin metal walls of the old trailer like a warning. Nolan Brooks heard them before he saw the shadow sliding across his window. A deep rumble, then another, and another. 6 in total. 6 SUVs rolling slow through the mud of the trailer park, their tires crushing gravel like bones under boots. Outside, the night drizzled in a soft, cold mist. Rain ticked on the tin roof in uneven taps. Tick, 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 tick. As if nervous fingers were tapping a message he couldn't read yet. A dog barked somewhere far off, then went silent. The whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Inside, Nolan knelt on the floor beside the old sofa, one hand steadying a small pot simmering on a portable stove, the other gently pressing a cool cloth to Mia's burning forehead. The little girl's breathing was uneven too fast, then too slow. He could hear every strained exhale. Her skin was hot damp. She let out a small whimper, and even half-conscious, she reached for him, her tiny fingers clutching the leg of his worn jeans like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. "It's all right, kiddo," Nolan whispered low enough not to scare her. "I'm right here." He stirred the chicken broth again. The spoon's soft clink against the pot sounded far too loud in the tight, quiet space. The trailer smelled faintly of ginger old wood and the humidity of rain sneaking in through imperfect seals. Beside him, the fraying blanket he'd tucked around Mia rose and fell in fragile hills with each breath. He didn't know how many nights he'd stayed up like this, counting the seconds between her shaky breaths, listening for the rasp in her chest, memorizing the rhythms of a child who still hadn't told him why she trusted him enough to collapse in his arms 2 days earlier. He only knew he couldn't leave her now. Not tonight. Not ever, if she needed him. Then came the knock. Bang. A heavy fist against thin metal. Nolan froze. The spoon slipped in his hand. Bang. 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 He felt Mia jerk against the sofa, her fingers tightening on him even in feverish sleep. Her breath hitched shallow and panicked. Nolan swallowed hard, instinctively lowering his body between her and the door. The knock came again, slow this time, firm, deliberate. Not the kind of knock kids used when trying to sell fundraisers, not the kind of knock neighbors used when asking for jumper cables. This was the kind of knock a man gave when he already knew you were home. A deep male voice followed, muffled through the rain and cheap door. Nolan Brooks. A pause. "We need to talk to you about the child." That made his stomach clench. He didn't answer. Didn't move. Even tried to breathe quietly, like silence might somehow make the whole world forget he existed. He knew that tone, authoritative, controlled, too calm to be friendly. Years of scraping by taught him that when people with that kind of voice came knocking, nothing good followed. Another voice rose behind it this time, feminine, softer, with an edge of exhaustion that felt deeply human. "My name is Elara Hartley," the woman called out her words, trembling faintly at the ends. "And I believe you have my daughter." Nolan's whole body stiffened. Elara Hartley, the billionaire CEO on every news channel for the past week. The woman whose daughter had been plastered across Amber Alert's billboards and emergency broadcasts. He looked down at Mia. Sweat beaded on her temple. Her lips were pale. She was barely conscious, barely holding on. But even in her fever, she refused to let go of him. Nolan felt the old instincts rising, protect first, question later. He wasn't a fighter. Not anymore. Not after losing Hannah. not after losing the life he once imagined he could have. But he knew how to shield a scared child. He knew how to read danger, even in the dark. He exhaled shakily and whispered more to himself than to her, "I've got you." Outside, the rain grew louder. A tense silence settled, punctuated only by the hum of idling engines, 6 SUVs lined up like a private army, and the steady patter of water dripping off their roofs. Nolan rose slowly, every joint aching from days of stress and sleeplessness. He wiped his palms on his jeans. His heartbeat thudded in his ears loud enough to drown out the storm. He glanced around the small trailer, the chipped counter, the patched curtains, the hand-me-down furniture he'd repaired a dozen times. Nothing about this place looked like somewhere a missing billionaire's daughter should be. But it had been safe for her. Safe enough to whisper, "Don't send me back," before exhaustion took her under. He reached for the door lock, hesitating as the metal knob felt cold against his hand. Behind him, Mia made a fragile sound, a small, broken whimper. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't equipped for this. He wasn't supposed to be part of a billionaire's nightmare, but he was the one Mia had crawled to. He was the one she trusted. And trust, especially from a hurting child, wasn't something Nolan Brooks ever took lightly. With a steadying breath, he turned the lock. The click echoed like a crack of thunder. As he began to pull the door open, the cold night rushed in the hiss of rain, the soft hum of engines' footsteps shifting on wet gravel. And just when the shadow of the woman outside started to sharpen, cut to black. The moment hung in the air, suspended, unfinished. A voice, Nolan's inner voice, whispered like a confession the audience wasn't supposed to hear. "Who exactly did I just open my door to?" For a long moment, the trailer stayed quiet after Nolan opened the door quiet in that strange, suspended way where the world feels like it's leaning in, waiting. And then the scene faded, like someone pulling him backward through memory until all he could hear again was the steady swish of a janitor's broom on polished school floors. 2 weeks earlier, the elementary school always woke slowly at dawn. Fluorescent lights buzzed themselves awake, vents sighed out the first warm breath of the morning, and somewhere down the hall a teacher tapped a stack of papers on her desk, straightening the edges. Nolan heard all of it, even from the far end of the corridor. He'd been a janitor for years. His ears knew the building like old friends knew one another's footfalls. He pushed his mop bucket forward, the wheels squeaking with an uneven rhythm. Squeak, roll, squeak, roll. A sound that would drive some folks crazy, but to him it was familiar. Steady, almost comforting. He hummed under his breath, not a tune, just a low noise to fill the empty halls. He was thinking about Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, staying with her grandma that week. He missed her chatter, her way of narrating every single thought like he was the audience she trusted most. He'd FaceTime her that night. She'd want to show him something, probably a new drawing or the cat next door. But before he reached the cafeteria, a different sound tugged at him. A rustle. A soft thud, something, shifting. It came from the mop closet. Nolan paused. Kids sometimes hid there on dares, or mice, or teachers trying to cry in peace before morning duty. He'd seen it all. He approached, slowly listening. Another sound, a shuffle, a muffled breath. He turned the knob. The door creaked open and the smell of dust and old disinfectant drifted out. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, its buzz shaky and unsteady. And in the far corner, curled behind a stack of boxes, was a small girl he had never seen before. She hugged her knees to her chest, her arms wrapped protectively around a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Dirt smudged her cheeks and shadows sat heavy under her eyes, not the cute kind kids got from staying up to read. This was the kind carved by fear and sleeplessness. Her clothes were rumpled too thin for November mornings, and her hair clung to her face in tangled strands. When the light hit her, she flinched hard, hiding her face behind the rabbit. Nolan's heart clenched. "Hey, hey." "Easy," he whispered, lowering himself to his knees so his voice came from her level, not above. "You're okay. It's just me." She shook her head without looking at him. "Please." Her voice cracked, barely audible. Please don't call the police. Don't send me back. Please." Nolan felt something shift inside his chest, a tight, painful tug he hadn't felt since the days when Hannah struggled after childbirth, back when he learned the meaning of helplessness. He cleared his throat gently. "I won't touch my phone. I promise. Can I get you something to drink?" A tiny pause, then a small nod. He handed her his water bottle from his tool belt. She drank greedily, like someone who'd been holding thirst behind her teeth for days. "You hungry?" he asked. She hesitated, but hunger won. He reached into his lunchbox and pulled out the simple sandwich he'd packed: cheap ham, a slice of cheese mustard smeared unevenly because he was rushing that morning. He tore it in half and offered one piece. She took it without lifting her eyes. When she finished, he gently coaxed her out of the closet, guiding her to the nurse's office. But the moment they walked past the front office windows, she stiffened. The second she saw the silhouette of a staff member turning their head toward her, she bolted. Just like that. Gone. By the time Nolan reached the doorway, she was already a blur down the hall, her footsteps light and frantic. He called after her, but she slipped out a side exit he'd forgotten the latch on. He didn't see her again that day. That night, after finishing the late shift, he stepped outside into the cold. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk. The wind carried the faint smell of rain. He zipped his jacket and walked toward the parking lot. And then he saw her. Under the small awning near the school entrance, the girl sat huddled against the wall. Her head slumped sideways, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. She had fallen asleep, sitting up, her body trembling slightly from the cold. Nolan stood there for a long second, long enough for guilt to settle in his stomach. She shouldn't be here. She should be home. Safe. Warm. But the look on her face, it was too familiar. Too much like Lily's on the night she lost Hannah. Too much like every lost child he'd ever seen. Quietly, he slipped out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She stirred barely, but didn't wake. He left a granola bar and a juice box beside her. He didn't touch her or try to carry her. Kids like that needed agency choices. He knew the signs. He took a step back. "Where do you belong, kid?" he murmured to the empty air. 3 days passed before he saw her again. It was raining hard. Cold sheets slapping the pavement in a steady rhythm, and he found her curled under the school's side ramp, soaked, shivering, and barely conscious. When he lifted her into his arms, she was limp, her forehead burning with fever. She didn't fight him this time, didn't beg him not to call anyone. She just rested her head against his shoulder like she'd been waiting for anyone to carry her. And Nolan didn't hesitate. Not then, not even for a second. He carried her straight to his truck, buckled her gently, and drove through the storm with one hand gripping the wheel and the other checking her pulse every few minutes. By the time they reached his trailer, her breaths had turned ragged. She whispered something, half dreaming, something that made his stomach drop. "Don't let him find me." The trailer door shut behind them with a hollow thud. He placed her on the sofa, tucked her in, turned on the stove, and began the long night of fever broth and whispered promises that he would figure this out. He didn't know then how deep the story went. He didn't know who she truly was. But he knew one thing. She needed him. And for a man who'd once failed someone he loved, there was no way in hell he was going to fail this child. The memory faded. The rain outside the trailer 2 weeks later grew louder. The footsteps beyond the open door shifted, and Nolan's breath caught as the present came rushing back. The storm hadn't moved on. It hovered over the trailer like a restless animal, rumbling low, making the thin metal walls vibrate every few minutes. Inside, the world felt smaller, warmer, and heavy with the scent of damp jackets and old pine wood. Mia lay curled on the sofa, her breaths shallow and uneven. The blanket Nolan had wrapped around her earlier rose and fell in fragile rhythms, each one sounding just a touch too weak for comfort. Nolan hovered near the kitchenette, hands steadying themselves on the counter before turning the burner knob. Click, click, whoosh. A soft flame hummed to life. The familiar sound grounded him in a way few things could. He poured chicken broth into a dented pot, listening to the gentle simmer begin. That noise, quiet, repetitive patient felt like the only thing in the room that wasn't trembling. Behind him, the sofa creaked. Mia mumbled something. He turned immediately. Her face tightened, a faint line cutting between her brows. Her fingers clawed weakly at the blanket as if bracing against some unseen force. "No. Don't." Her voice thinned into a whimper. "Don't lock me in. Please." Nolan's heart clenched. This wasn't the fever talking. This was memory bleeding into her dreams. He knelt beside her, brushing the damp hair off her forehead. Her skin radiated heat, dangerously so. "You're safe," he whispered. "I'm right here." Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. "Don't. Let him find me. Him." The word hung in the air like a cold breath. Nolan swallowed hard. He soaked a washcloth in cool water, wrung it out, and pressed it gently to her skin. She flinched at first, then melted into the touch, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. The broth behind him began to bubble softly, filling the room with a warm, savory comfort. He poured some into a cup and returned to the sofa. "Mia," he murmured, "let's try this. Just a little." She didn't respond. Her breathing had turned shallower, her lips dry. Nolan slid behind her, supporting her back, so she leaned into him. Her head found the hollow of his shoulder instinctively, like it was something she'd practiced in another life. "Hey, kiddo. Just a sip." He brought the cup to her lips. She drank faintly at first, then with a desperation that tugged at him. Her small fingers curled into his shirt as she swallowed. When she was done, she slumped against him, breath hot against his chest. The moment cracked something open in him, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. A memory, Hannah trembling in a hospital bed, him holding her through night terrors, wishing he could trade places with her for even a minute. He breathed out slowly. Not again. Not another person slipping through his fingers. Not this child. He eased Mia back onto the sofa, tucking the blanket tighter around her. Something silver glinted near her wrist. A bracelet. Small. Delicate. Slightly tarnished. He lifted it gently. A tiny charm hung from the chain, engraved with two simple words, M. Hartley. It sparked recognition not from her face but from the endless news clips that had been playing in every bar, every diner, every gas station for nearly 2 weeks. He frowned. No way. As if responding to his disbelief, the old TV in the corner crackled. He'd forgotten it was still plugged in. Static buzzed. Then a reporter's voice broke through. "The search continues for 9-year-old Mia Hartley, daughter of tech billionaire Alara Hartley." The room fell silent except for the faint whistle of wind pushing against the trailer. Nolan stared at the TV, then at the bracelet, then at the child lying inches away. He felt the ground under him shift, not physically but morally, spiritually, irrevocably. The bracelet slipped from his fingers and clinked against the coffee table. Missing for 11 days, the anchor continued. Authorities urge anyone with information. Mia stirred violently as if the voice itself clawed at her dreams. "No. No, please don't make me." Nolan grabbed the remote and muted the screen. His pulse drummed hard in his ears. He sat on the floor, legs folding under him slowly, almost mechanically. The bracelet dangled between his fingers as he stared at the muted image of Alara Hartley on the screen. Eyes, red jaw, tight desperation etched into every line of her face. A mother begging for help. A child begging not to be found. The contradiction hit him like a blow. He looked at Mia again, her small frame swallowed by the blanket, her breath rattling softly, her brow damp with fever. This wasn't a runaway. This wasn't a lost child. This was a child escaping something. Escaping someone. A chill snaked down Nolan's spine. Mia shifted again, her voice breaking into a raw whisper. "Don't let him find me." That did it. Nolan's hand closed around the bracelet so tightly the metal dug into his skin. Outside, thunder rolled like distant furniture scraping across the sky. Inside, the truth settled heavy and cold. Whatever Mia had run from wasn't just a bad home. It was danger. Real danger. And somehow, ready or not, Nolan Brooks had just stepped directly into the crosshairs of it. The next morning arrived quietly slipping into the trailer through thin curtains and settling over everything with the soft hush of a tired sigh. Rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world damp and muted. The only sounds came from the small bedside fan clicking in an uneven rhythm and the faint rustle of blankets as Mia stirred. Nolan had barely slept. He sat at the small kitchen table, elbows on his knees, the silver bracelet lying on the wood in front of him like a question he was terrified to answer. Every now and then he looked toward the sofa where Mia slept, her breathing still shallow but more steady than the night before. Her cheeks weren't as flushed. The fever had dipped, though not enough for comfort. He brewed instant coffee, the aroma thin and bitter, but it kept him grounded. He didn't dare leave her side long enough to make anything better. When Mia shifted again, letting out a soft groan, he rose immediately and walked over. "Hey, kiddo," he whispered. "You're okay. You're safe." Her eyes cracked open, unfocused and glossy. She blinked slowly as if dragging herself back to the present. It hurts," she whispered. "I know." He brushed a damp strand of hair off her forehead. "Let's try a little soup, all right? Just a few spoonfuls." She nodded weakly. He sat beside her, supporting her back as he lifted the bowl. She drank tiny sips, pausing often, her breath fluttering like a tiny bird in his hands. When she'd had enough, he set the bowl down and eased her back into the pillows. The TV remote lay within reach. He turned it on, hoping the familiar chatter of morning news might distract her. He didn't expect her face to fill the screen. A reporter spoke with the practiced calm of someone used to tragedies. And this morning, Ilara Hartley made another public statement as the search for her daughter, 9-year-old Mia Hartley, enters its 12th day. Nolan froze. The camera cut to a podium, a sea of microphones, and a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Ilara Hartley. Her posture was upright and commanding, but her voice cracked on the word, daughter. "We won't stop searching," she said. "I ask no. I beg anyone who has seen her, or thinks they've seen her, to contact authorities immediately. She's scared. She needs help." The screen flashed photos of Mia smiling at a science fair, holding a puppy wearing the same bracelet now sitting on Nolan's table. Mia saw it before he could mute the sound. Her breath hitched, her fingers dug into the blanket. "That's your mom," Nolan said softly, not pushing, not leaning in, just naming the truth. "That's her, isn't it?" Mia didn't answer. Her small chest rose faster. Her eyes darted between the screen and the front door as if expecting someone to burst in. "Mia," he tried again, his voice gentler. "Talk to me." Her lips trembled, but no words came. She wasn't just sick. She was terrified. He muted the TV and reached for his phone. He didn't call 911. Not yet. He called someone else. "Jenny," he said when she answered. Her voice was warm and groggy. Night shifts always hit hard. "I need to ask you something. Hypothetically." She sighed. "Nolan, whenever you say hypothetically, it's never good." "A kid," he said. "A young girl shows up. Maybe from a bad home situation. Maybe scared of being taken back. What happens if I call it in?" Her tone sharpened. "They take her into custody right away. CPS emergency placement. Everything moves fast, sometimes too fast. And what if the kid's fragile? All the more reason the system steps in. But Nolan," she added softer, "now it can be rough. Investigations, foster care rotations, interviews. It's not a gentle process." He stared at Mia, the way she curled inward as though bracing for a blow, the way her body remembered fear even when her mind was cloudy from fever. "Is there any way to protect her even temporarily?" he asked. "Only if you have legal standing," Jenny said, "or if you're acting under immediate threat to the child's well-being. But once the authorities are involved, you lose that control." He thanked her, though his voice felt like gravel. He didn't want to be the man who delayed a billionaire mother from finding her child. But he also didn't want to be the man who handed a terrified girl back to an abuser because a system didn't have time to understand her story. He set the phone aside. Mia was watching him wide-eyed, trembling. "Are they going to take me?" she whispered. His chest tightened. "Mia, I don't want to see anyone hurt you. Ever." She hesitated, then with surprising clarity she asked, "If they find me, will they send me back to him?" The word "him" hit the air like a shockwave. Nolan leaned closer, lowering his voice to a steady, grounding whisper. "Who do you mean, sweetheart?" Her eyes darted to the door again. The fear in them wasn't vague, it wasn't confusion, it was memory. Before she could answer, a loud buzzing cut through the room. Amber Alert. His phone lit up with the broadcast. So did the old TV, unmuted by the system override. So did the emergency radio, all of them showing the same photo, the same name, the same missing child. Mia Hartley. Mia recoiled, clutching her stomach like the alert itself had struck her. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Please, please turn it off." He muted the TV, but the alert still glowed on the screen, bright and unrelenting. Mia covered her ears. "I don't want to go back to him," she said, her voice cracking like a fragile shell. Nolan knelt in front of her, both hands steadying her shoulders. "Listen to me. No one is taking you anywhere until we figure out what's really going on. I'm not letting anything happen to you. Not now. Not ever." Her breathing slowed just barely. The trailer, already small, felt suddenly too tight, too full of secrets, too full of a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He looked at the bracelet again. M. Hartley. There was no denying it now. The child in his trailer wasn't just lost. She was the missing piece of a much larger story, and the world outside was coming for her. The Amber Alert didn't fade quietly. It lingered, buzzing on Nolan's phone, flashing across the muted TV, pulsing through the tiny trailer like an alarm meant for him alone. Even after the screens went dark again, the echo of it remained vibrating in his chest like a warning he couldn't outrun. Mia curled into the corner of the sofa, hugging her knees, the blanket pulled to her chin. Her breaths came sharp and shaky, every inhale sounding like it scraped against old bruises inside her. "Nolan," she whispered, "they'll send me back. They will. They always do." The certainty in her voice, so small, so wounded, hit him harder than any siren. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the metal siding of the trailer in long, low groans. Rain hadn't returned yet, but the sky felt heavy enough to break. He crouched in front of her, careful not to crowd her. "Mia, listen. Nobody is just grabbing you and throwing you somewhere. Not while I'm around." She shook her head violently. "You don't know him. You don't know what he does when he gets mad." Nolan swallowed. Her fear wasn't vague. It wasn't the fear of a child who got lost in a mall or argued with a parent. This was the kind of fear people carried in their bones. He stood, slowly stepping into the kitchenette where the bracelet lay. The silver charm glinted under the dull light. Mia Hartley, a billionaire's daughter sleeping on his sofa. The gravity of that reality pressed deeper with every second. He picked up his phone and stared at it. The lock screen still displayed the alert. Amber Alert, missing child, Mia Hartley. His thumb hovered over the call button for 911. He inhaled, exhaled, gripped the phone tighter. He dialed, but not the police. Instead, he dialed the CPS hotline anonymous tip line. He told himself this was the responsible step, the right thing to do. But somewhere deep inside, he already knew the truth. He wasn't calling to report Mia. He was calling to understand the system he was about to defy. The line clicked. A woman answered with polite professionalism. "Child Protective Services. How may I assist you today?" "This is hypothetical," Nolan said. "Sir, what's happening?" "A child," he said carefully, keeping his voice low so Mia wouldn't hear. "A girl. She's maybe 9. She's scared, really scared. Says going home isn't safe. Is she with you?" "Hypothetically," he repeated. There was a brief pause. "If you report her," the woman explained, "she will be taken into protective custody. Immediate placement. We work fast in these cases, and then she goes to foster care while we investigate the family situation. We'll review her history, any past complaints, and make decisions accordingly." He swallowed. "And if she's terrified, if she panics around strangers, if she runs." "That's normal," she said gently. "Many children go through fear responses. The best thing is to get her into the system quickly. And I don't get a say. Not unless you have legal standing as a guardian or relative." He thanked her and hung up. His hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down. Legal standing, guardianship, investigations, foster care. The words rattled around in his mind like loose bolts in a spinning machine. He looked over at Mia again. She'd fallen asleep, sitting upright, exhaustion pulling her under. Her small fingers loosened around the blanket, revealing faint bruising near her wrist, bruises too small to be accidents, too old to be new. His stomach twisted. She wasn't running from a misunderstanding. She was running from a person, a place, a nightmare. And if he called the system now, before she healed, before anyone understood what she'd been through, she would be thrown back into the noise of files forms, rushing hands, and cold waiting rooms. He'd worked with kids long enough to know trauma didn't heal in chaos. He'd witnessed Lily's grief after Hannah's death, how kids folded into themselves when the world moved too fast around them. He couldn't let that happen to Mia. Not yet, not again, not on his watch. He grabbed a notebook from the counter, one he usually used for budgeting. He flipped to an empty page. "Okay," he murmured. "If the world's coming, we're going to be ready." He began writing. Day 1. Found feverish. Mumbled about being locked in a room. Visible bruising on wrist photograph needed. Avoids mention of father. Extreme fear response to authority figures on TV. He snapped a picture of her wrist bruise discreetly, took another of her sleeping posture, noting signs of exhaustion and stress. He pressed record on his phone when she stirred and whispered something fragmented. Yelling, "Don't lock. I'll be good. I promise." He saved it, not to use against her mother, but to protect her from the man she feared. When she woke again, he sat beside her with a soft smile. "How about we call Lily, my daughter? She's your age. Sweet kid. She'd like you." Mia hesitated, but curiosity flickered. He dialed. Lily's bright voice burst through the speaker. "Dad, did you see my picture? Grandma says, wait, who's that with you?" Mia leaned toward the phone. "This is Mia," Nolan said softly. "Hi, Mia," Lily chirped. "Want to see my new stickers? They're dinosaurs." Mia blinked, a genuine blink, a small spark of something warm. They talked for 5 minutes, mostly Lily talking, Mia listening. But when Lily held up a purple dinosaur sticker to the camera, Mia whispered, "I like that one," almost shyly. And for a moment the weight in the room lifted. After the call, Nolan guided Mia toward simple routines, small chores she could help with. Folding a towel, choosing a bedtime story, picking between 2 cups for water. Little anchors in a world where she'd had none. Later that evening, as Nolan stepped outside to toss a small bag of trash into the dumpster, he froze. A dark pickup truck idled at the far edge of the trailer park. No headlights, no movement, just the low purr of an engine waiting, watching. A cold sensation crawled up Nolan's spine. He tightened his grip on the trash bag. After a minute, the truck rolled back slowly, too slowly, and disappeared down the dirt road. Nolan's pulse hammered in his ears. He walked back inside and locked the door. Then he locked the second latch. Then he slid a chair under the knob. Inside, Mia slept. Peaceful, vulnerable. He looked at her and whispered to himself, "I think we're running out of time." Long before 6 SUVs rolled into the trailer park, before her voice trembled outside Nolan's door, Elara Hartley had already spent weeks living in a storm of her own. Not the kind that fell from the sky, those were easy compared to the kind that brewed inside boardrooms. The soundscape of her life had become predictable, the hard clack of fountain pens against mahogany tables, the shuffle of expensive suit jackets, the low hum of anxious murmuring. Even now, seated at the head of a conference room high above the city, she heard it all pressing in on her like static. A PR director cleared his throat. "Ms. Hartley, we need another statement by noon. Public sentiment is turning. They think you're withholding information." Alara didn't look up. She stared at the folder in front of her printout screenshots, police reports, timelines. None of them had answers. A lawyer to her right flipped pages. "We should be prepared for questions about the custody ruling 3 years ago." Her jaw tightened. Custody ruling. Those 2 words alone could slice straight through her. Her ex-husband's attorney had painted her as emotionally unstable and work-obsessed. A woman, too consumed by her billion-dollar empire to care for her child. The court bought it. Derek had smiled the whole time. A board member leaned in. "We need to take control of the narrative." She slammed the folder shut. "The narrative," she said sharply, "is that my daughter is missing. And every second I sit in this room is a second I'm not finding her." Silence rippled outward. She stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor, an audio jolt that turned every head. She didn't care. She left the room heels, striking the marble hallway in sharp, furious clicks. But once she reached her office, once the door clicked shut, once the lights dimmed behind her, all the ice melted. She leaned her back against the door and exhaled shakily. For days now, she had survived on fumes, coffee adrenaline, and fear that felt like it was clawing through her ribs. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mia's last expression the day she left with Derek. Scared, confused, holding a stuffed rabbit and looking back at her as the judge's words sank in. "You do not currently provide a stable environment." She'd fought. God, she'd fought. But the system didn't want to hear the truth. It never did. Now, here she was, richest woman in the state, leader of one of the biggest tech companies, yet powerless in the one place that mattered most. Her phone buzzed. A message from her head of security. "We found something." She straightened immediately. 10 minutes later, she sat in a secured briefing room. Screens lit up as her lead investigator laid out footage. This is from a camera near the elementary school where Mia was last spotted. The first video showed a small girl walking alone, shoulders slumped, hugging a backpack. The timestamp hit her like a punch 5 days before Mia disappeared entirely. Another clip, the girl ducking into a hallway. Another, a janitor, tall, broad-shouldered, quiet, gently guiding her out of the rain with his jacket. "Who is he?" Alara asked. "Nolan Brooks, 41. Works as a janitor at the school. Single father, clean record, has a daughter of his own." More clips surfaced. The janitor leaving food, covering the girl with his coat while she slept near the school entrance, carrying her to his truck on a stormy night. He didn't alert anyone, the investigator said carefully, but he also hasn't harmed her. From everything we found. She seems to trust him. Alara's throat constricted around a painful cocktail of emotions: hope, jealousy, gratitude, regret. Why had her child trusted a stranger more than her? No, she corrected the thought, not a stranger. A man who had shown kindness when the world didn't. She zoomed in on a still frame of him lifting Mia into his arms, gentle, careful, steady. Something inside her softened, but right behind that softness came fear. If he had Mia, others might know too. If Derek found out, the thought chilled her to the bone. She stood abruptly. "We're going." "Ma'am, we follow that lead. Now, prepare the team." Not her assistant, not her PR director, not her attorney. Her motherhood spoke. Find her. Protect her. Before he does. Hours later, the sky unspooled into a cold, relentless rain. Thunder rolled low across the horizon. Alara sat in the back of the lead SUV, hands gripping each other tightly in her lap. She watched the city lights fade into rural darkness. Gravel roads replaced asphalt. Trailers began appearing like lonely islands in the storm. Her security chief spoke through the radio. Location confirmed. No sign of movement. Her breath quickened. Please, she prayed silently. Please let her be there. Let her be okay. As the SUVs slowed to a stop, rain hammered the roof so hard the interior vibrated. She stepped out into the downpour. Cold water slid down the back of her neck, soaking her blazer instantly, but she didn't flinch. This was the closest she'd been to her daughter in nearly 2 weeks. She approached the door of the trailer. Her security agent knocked firmly. Bang! 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 Mr. Brooks, the agent, called. A dog barked somewhere far in the distance. The rain hissed on the dirt like boiling water thrown into snow. Then she stepped forward. "My name is Ilara Hartley," she said, voice trembling. "And I believe you have my daughter." She heard movement inside, the subtle scuff of feet on linoleum, a sharp inhale, a man steadying himself on the other side of the door. Then a click. The lock turned. The door opened. She saw him, first Nolan Brooks. He looked exhausted, wary, soaked in worry more than rain. But behind him, barely visible, was the outline of a little girl clutching a blanket. "Mia," she whispered, voice breaking. The girl shrank behind Nolan's legs, and for the first time in her life, the world's most powerful woman felt powerless. Nolan stepped aside just enough to block the storm from hitting Mia. His voice was calm, firm, unshakably protective. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Inside. Thunder cracked overhead. Their story was about to change forever. The door shut on the storm with a hollow thud, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the thin walls and the faint hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence. The trailer felt smaller than ever, too many emotions in too tight a space. Ilara Hartley stood just inside the doorway, rainwater streaming from her hair dripping onto the worn linoleum floor in small rhythmic taps. Her eyes, sharp and exhausted, scanned the cramped interior, the stacked books by the sofa, the folded blankets, the chipped mug on the counter. A life built on modest things. A life she had never stepped into before. But none of it mattered. Her gaze found Mia. The little girl hovered behind Nolan's leg, fingers curled tight in the fabric of his jeans. She peeked out with wide, frightened eyes. Eyes Ilara had memorized since the moment she held her daughter in a hospital room 9 years ago. "Mia." Her voice cracked. "Honey, it's me." Mia flinched, shrinking further behind Nolan. The sound of her own daughter recoiling carved something raw and painful deep inside Ilara's chest. For a moment, she forgot the 6 SUVs outside, the social worker behind her, the lawyer adjusting his damp briefcase. She forgot the cameras that had followed her for days. All she saw was a child who no longer looked at her with recognition. Only fear. Nolan stepped forward slightly, not aggressive, not possessive, just enough to shield Mia from the intensity of the moment. "Let's sit," he said quietly. "All of us." His voice was steady, grounded, the kind of voice people listened to. They gathered around the small kitchen table, Nolan on one side, Ilara and her social worker on the other. The lawyer stood behind her, hands folded. Mia stayed pressed against Nolan, her hand gripping the hem of his flannel shirt. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain whispering across the trailer roof. Then Nolan spoke. "I didn't know who she was at first," he began. "I found her hiding at the school, scared, sick, terrified of being taken back to someone who hurt her. He didn't say Derek's name. He didn't have to." Ilara's jaw clenched. A muscle in her cheek twitched. "She should have been taken to a hospital," the lawyer interjected. Nolan looked up sharply. "And thrown straight into a system she isn't ready for. She wakes up screaming when she hears a door shut. She sobs in her sleep. She flinches when someone raises a hand too fast." He shook his head. "I wasn't going to subject her to interrogation rooms and clipboard interviews before she even had the strength to stand." Alara opened her mouth, then closed it. Her breath stuttered. The social worker leaned forward. "Mr. Brooks, legally—" "You can't." Legally, Nolan cut in gently. I should have called the second I recognized her from the news. But morally, he looked at Mia. Morally, I couldn't. The trailer held the weight of that sentence. Alara stared at the little girl she'd given birth to, the child she used to braid hair for. On Sunday mornings, the little person who once insisted on sleeping with a nightlight shaped like a cloud. Now, this daughter hugged a stranger for safety. The truth hit like cold water. She lowered her voice and tried again. "Sweetheart, I'm your mom. Please just look at me." Mia's head barely turned. Her lips parted, trembling not with recognition but with a fear so deep it hollowed her voice. "I don't want to go back to him." Alara gasped softly, a sound somewhere between heartbreak and rage. "He told the court I was unstable," she whispered, speaking more to herself than anyone else. "He said I chased my career more than my family." Her voice cracked, but I never stopped loving her. For the first time, Mia's eyes flickered. Not trust, but curiosity. Nolan sensed the shift. Maybe he said gently, "This isn't about who failed or who won. Maybe it's about what Mia needs right now." And what she needs, the lawyer said stiffly, is to be in her mother's care. But before he could continue, Mia sobbed. A quiet, stifled, terrified sound. Nolan moved instantly, kneeling beside her. Hey, breathe, I'm here." Alara watched aching as Nolan steadied the girl with soft words and gentle hands. She'd forgotten how to comfort someone that way. Somewhere between boardrooms and courtrooms, she had lost the softness she once carried so easily. The social worker leaned in. "We can set up emergency placement with her mother tonight." "No." Nolan's voice was firm. "She's not ready. This isn't your decision." "No," he agreed. "It's hers." His eyes met Alara's. "You want custody, I understand. But you're asking a frightened child to jump from a feverish nightmare straight into a legal battle. She needs stability. She needs to heal. And she needs to feel safe with you again." The lawyer opened his mouth. Nolan raised a hand. "Here's what I propose," he said, turning to Alara, not her team. "You come here every day. You reconnect with her, slowly, respectfully. We involve a child psychologist, a neutral evaluator. But for now," he exhaled, "she stays where she feels safe." A heavy silence followed. Alara's voice, when it came, was barely audible. "How did my daughter stop feeling safe with me?" It wasn't a challenge, it was confession, defeat, a mother speaking to the quiet cracks in her own heart. Nolan softened. Sometimes, he said gently, kids break quietly. They don't always tell us, they just hide until they find someone who listens. Alara blinked hard. Tears welled, then slid down her cheeks in thin, trembling lines. She nodded. Her voice was fragile when she spoke. "Okay, I'll do it your way." Mia watched her mother for the first time without shrinking, still wary, but watching. Nolan rose, walked to the stove, and ladled warm soup into a small bowl. He brought it to the table, setting it in front of Alara. "If you want," he said softly, "I can show you how she likes it." Small spoonfuls. Slow pace. The trailer held its breath. Alara lifted the spoon. Her hand shook. She offered it to Mia. The girl turned away instinctively, reflexively, but didn't run. When Alara's hand lowered, defeated, Nolan stepped beside her and whispered, "Try sitting beside her. Not in front. Don't force the moment. Let it come to you." She nodded. For the first time in years, she let someone teach her how to be a mother. And for the first time in days, Mia didn't look terrified. It was small, fragile, but real. A seed of healing planted in a storm. The days that followed didn't begin with court orders or flashing headlines. They began quietly, almost tenderly, with the small sounds of a life being rebuilt. The trailer woke each morning to soft knocks instead of pounding fists, to hesitant greetings instead of interrogations, and to the slow, unsure steps of a mother trying to relearn the shape of her daughter's world. For Alara, Hartley humility was not a familiar companion. But every dawn she showed up with her hair in a loose ponytail instead of a corporate twist, jeans instead of tailored suits, sneakers instead of heels. Some mornings she carried pancakes in a cardboard box from a diner she used to pass without noticing. Other mornings she brought books, crayons, or a small toy she wasn't sure Mia would accept. She always paused outside the trailer door, breathing in, steadying herself before knocking lightly. And every time it was Nolan who opened it, tired-eyed, warm-voiced, steady as a lighthouse. Morning, he'd greet her with a nod. Morning, she'd echo, clutching her offering like a peace treaty. Inside, the routines were gentle but structured small anchors for a child who'd known too many storms. Mia would sometimes sit on the sofa, sometimes by the tiny table, always with her stuffed rabbit nearby. Her fever was gone, but the shadows under her eyes remained. Healing was slow, cautious like a frightened animal learning that not every hand meant harm. One morning, Alara offered her pancakes shaped like little bears. "They're supposed to be cute," she said, awkwardly lifting the lid. The man at the diner said, "Kids like them." Mia stared for a long time. Then, very quietly, she whispered, "I like the ears." A small miracle. Ilara's eyes filled instantly. Another day, Nolan stood beside her at the stove, showing her how to warm soup the way Mia liked it, small spoonfuls to test the temperature, not stirring too fast because the sound could startle her. "That's good," he murmured, watching her ladle the soup. "She doesn't like it too hot." Ilara's shoulders dropped in relief, like she'd passed an exam she'd been failing for years. She didn't know how to ask the questions burning inside her. Questions about why Mia trusted him so deeply or what her daughter had endured while she hadn't been looking. She wanted to ask, but she was learning painfully that healing meant listening before speaking. Meanwhile, Lily Nolan's daughter arrived on weekends. She bounded into the trailer with a burst of sunshine blonde hair, bouncing voice, carrying every bit of 8-year-old excitement. "Mia, look, I brought my board game and crayons and stickers." For the first time in weeks, Mia smiled fully. Lily took her hand like they'd known each other their whole lives. Nolan watched them from the doorway, arms crossed, a soft, unguarded pride on his face. Ilara watched them too, something warm and aching unfolding in her chest. Children trusted without conditions. They didn't care about net worths, custody rulings, or boardroom politics. They cared about kindness, safety, someone sitting next to them so they didn't feel alone. Later that night, after both girls were asleep, a tangle of blankets and whispered secrets, Nolan stepped out to take the trash to the curb. The evening air was crisp, smelling faintly of pine and distant rain. Crickets chirped somewhere near the fence. When he came back, he found Ilara sitting outside on the old front step, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out at the quiet trailer park. The lamplight from the pole above them buzzed softly, casting long shadows. Nolan hesitated in the doorway. "You all right?" She didn't look up at first. "Do you ever wonder how everything can go so wrong?" she whispered, "even when you swear you're doing everything right." He sat down beside her, keeping respectful distance. "Parenting isn't a straight road. It's more like learning while building the map." Ilara let out a shaky laugh. "You make it sound almost manageable." "Well," he said, "some days it is, and some days it just isn't." Silence settled again, not heavy, not awkward. Just two tired souls sitting in the quiet, listening to the night breathe around them. After a long moment, she spoke. "I used to tuck Mia in every night. Read to her. This was before the company grew, before the custody battle, before Derek turned things ugly." Her voice softened. "I wasn't always this unreachable person." "I don't think you're unreachable," Nolan said quietly. "Just bruised, like the rest of us." She turned to him, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "What about you?" she asked. What broke you?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the trailer window where the faint shapes of the girls sleeping cast soft shadows. "My wife," he said, finally. "Hannah. Postpartum hit her hard. I missed the signs. I told myself she was just tired. Then one night when I took an extra shift, everything fell apart." Alara's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." He shrugged faintly, but his eyes told a different story. "I promised myself I'd never miss the signs again. Not with Lily. Not with any kid who crosses my path." That quiet vow hung in the air. Their eyes met two broken hearts recognizing the cracks in each other. Not romantic, not yet, but profoundly human. Inside, the girls shifted a soft murmur passing between them in sleep. The sound made something gentle tighten in both their chests. It was Alara who finally broke the silence. "I want to fight for her," she whispered. "Not for custody, not for a headline. For her. For who she is. For who she could be." Nolan nodded. "Then we do this together. No winners, no losers, just what's best for Mia." For the first time in a long time, she believed it was possible. Later that week, everything changed again. On a quiet evening, Nolan stepped outside with another bag of trash. The air smelled of wet soil after a brief sprinkle. The street lamp buzzed above him. And then, movement. A dark silhouette near the fence line. A man. Still. Watching. Nolan's breath stopped. As the street lamp flickered, he glimpsed a long scar cutting through the man's eyebrow, unmistakable from the photo Alara had shown him. Derek Hartley. He exhaled sharply, adrenaline flooding his system. The man whispered something into the darkness. A name. Mia. Then he flicked away a cigarette embers dying in the wet grass and melted into the shadows. Nolan stood frozen. The storm they'd been hiding from was closer than any of them realized. The next afternoon arrived deceptively peaceful, the kind of afternoon where the sun warmed the cracked pavement, where the air held the faint smell of grass after rain, where children's laughter drifted from distant porches. It was the kind of day that could fool a man into thinking the world was steady again. But Nolan Brooks knew better. He hadn't told Alara about the shadow he'd seen the night before, not yet. He wanted facts, not fear. He wanted certainty before he brought another earthquake into her already fragile world. Still, his eyes kept scanning the edges of the trailer park, his ears tuned to every engine rumble, every crunch of gravel. Something inside him was bracing for an impact he couldn't yet see. By late afternoon, Alara, Mia, and Lily decided to take the girls to the small community playground down the road. It wasn't fancy, just an old swing set, a slide that squeaked when kids went down it, and a patch of grass that had seen better days, but it was open and bright, and both girls needed the sun. The sunlight made Mia look almost carefree, her hair catching the light as she followed Lily up the slide ladder. She wasn't laughing yet, not fully, but there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Healing wasn't loud. It came in tiny pulses, almost imperceptible. Nolan watched them play, arms folded loosely, while Alara lingered near the bench, biting gently at her thumbnail, an old unconscious habit she thought she'd outgrown years ago. "You ever notice," Nolan said quietly, walking up beside her kids, "don't need much to feel alive again. Just space to breathe. Someone watching their back." Alara exhaled shakily. "I wish I had known that earlier." "You're learning now," he replied. "That's what matters." She gave him a small, sad smile, one he wasn't ready to unpack yet. He was just starting to relax when he heard it. A shift. A footstep too heavy to be a child's. A rustle that didn't belong to wind or leaves. His body reacted before his brain caught up. The hairs on his arms rose, his muscles tightened. Then he saw him. A man moving fast across the far corner of the playground, heading straight toward the slide. Tall, strong, clothes clean but wrinkled, a scar slicing through one eyebrow. Exactly the man Nolan had seen the night before. Exactly the man Mia had been whispering about for days. Exactly the man Alara feared more than any courtroom. Derek Hartley. Before Nolan could even shout, Mia saw him. Her entire body stiffened. Her hands dropped from the ladder. Her breath shattered into terrified gasps. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Derek lunged toward her, grabbing her wrist with a force that made her shriek. "You're coming home," he growled. "Now." The sound that tore from Mia's throat wasn't a child's cry. It was the sound of a memory resurfacing, a locked door, a dark room, the echo of rage. Ilara screamed. "Derek, let her go." She ran toward them, but Nolan was faster. He bounded across the playground, his boots pounding the dirt, adrenaline surging in his veins. But he didn't tackle Derek, not yet. He didn't make the mistake of escalating, not with Mia pinned between them. He put himself between Derek and the girl's, arms out, voice sharp but controlled. "Let her go, Derek. Now." Derek sneered. "You think you can keep my daughter from me?" "You some janitor." Mia clawed at Derek's sleeve, trying to pull free. "Please don't. Please don't." Nolan took a step closer, positioning himself so he shielded both girls. He pulled his phone from his pocket with calculated calm. "I already called 911, he said evenly. "They're 2 minutes out." He hadn't, not yet, but Derek didn't know that. Derek's jaw tightened. "She belongs with me." "No," Ilara snapped, running up beside them. Her voice shook, but there was steel in it. "She belongs somewhere safe." Derek's grip tightened. Mia cried out. That sound pushed Nolan over the edge. He moved fast, one arm looping around Derek's wrist, the other bracing Mia's back as he pried her free. She stumbled into his chest, sobbing, trembling violently. He lifted her, holding her against him like a shield he refused to lower. Derek lunged for them again, roaring, but this time Nolan stepped between them fully. "You come near her again," Nolan warned, "and you'll answer for every bruise she's ever had." Sirens wailed in the distance, sharp, urgent, growing louder. Derek froze. Then he spat at the ground. "This isn't over." 2 squad cars screeched to a halt near the playground. Officers jumped out, hands on their belts, assessing the situation fast. A social worker summoned by Ilara's private team and arriving behind the officers ran up, breathless. "Mr. Hartley," she called. "There's a restraining order on file. Step back immediately." That sealed it. In seconds, Derek was in cuffs, shouting curses, thrashing as they pushed him toward the cruiser. "See you in court," he yelled at Ilara. "You think this changes anything? She's still mine." Ilara clung to Lily, trembling. Tears streamed down her face, but she held it together for the girls. Mia, still in Nolan's arms, buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing silently, each breath a tremor. "It's okay," Nolan whispered, his voice breaking. "You're safe. I've got you." But even as he soothed her, he knew this moment wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning. Hours later, after statements, after paperwork, after trauma counselors and police protocols, they found themselves in a different kind of room. A small, echoing courtroom, a family judge, 2 attorneys, a CPS representative, Ilara Hartley, Nolan Brooks, and a little girl holding on to a stuffed rabbit for dear life. Microphones hummed. The judge cleared his throat. "We are here to determine what is in the best interest of the child." The air thickened. Nolan felt his own heartbeat in his throat. Then the judge leaned forward, eyes softening. "Mia," he said gently, "I need to ask you a very important question." Silence. "Where do you want to live?" Every adult in the room exhaled. Mia lifted her head. And the chapter ended right there on the precipice of a truth that would change all of their lives. For a moment, the world forgot to breathe. The courtroom, normally a place of paperwork, procedure, and steady, predictable order, felt suspended in a fragile quiet. Even the buzzing microphone seemed to hold its static in its throat as everyone waited for a single trembling child to decide the fate of 3 adults. Mia sat on the edge of her chair, knees tucked inward, fingers gripping the frayed tail of her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes, still red from crying, moved slowly between Nolan and Ilara, and the door where Derek had been escorted out in cuffs hours earlier. The judge softened his voice. "Mia, sweetheart, Where do you feel safe?" Her lower lip quivered. She looked at Nolan first, the man who held her through nightmares, the man who stayed, the man who didn't yell when she spilled soup or froze in fear. Then at her mother, the woman she once ran to as a toddler, the woman she used to copy makeup from on Sunday mornings, the woman she didn't know how to trust anymore but still remembered loving. Mia swallowed hard. Her voice, when it came, was small but steady. I feel safe. When they're both there." A whisper rippled through the room, lawyers' clerks, CPS workers shifting, startled by the unexpected answer. Not one, not the other. Both. Ilara covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Tears she'd been holding back for days finally escaped. Nolan felt his heart twist in a way he'd never expected, equal parts relief, awe, and a new, heavier responsibility. The judge leaned back thoughtful. Child preference is important, but shared custody between a biological parent and a non-relative caregiver is uncommon, but not impossible, said the CPS representative gently. Ilara straightened, wiping her tears quickly. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling but strong, "I will do whatever it takes. Therapy, parenting classes, supervision, evaluations, anything. I won't fight him." She motioned to Nolan. "I want to work with him. For her." Nolan blinked, surprised. The judge looked at him. "Mr. Brooks." Nolan cleared his throat. "I don't want to replace anyone. I just want her safe." "And do you understand," the judge said carefully, "that by accepting a role as a de facto caregiver, you become legally accountable for decisions involving the child?" Nolan nodded. "Yes, sir." He spoke without hesitation, but inside something warm and humbling bloomed. He wasn't being treated like a janitor hovering outside the system. He was being recognized as someone who mattered in Mia's life. Someone who had shown up when no one else could. The judge shuffled papers, then spoke with measured gravity. Given the history of domestic concerns, the child's documented fear responses, the mother's willingness to comply with family therapy and supervised reintegration, and the emotional bond with Mr. Brooks, the court will allow the following temporary arrangement. Ilara Hartley retains primary custody. Mr. Nolan Brooks is granted formal supportive caregiver status with visitation rights, involvement in the child's daily stability plan, and legal permission to act in emergencies. A full custody review will occur after psychological evaluations and 8 weeks of documented progress. The finality of the words settled over them like warm dust. Ilara gasped a quiet breath of relief. Nolan closed his eyes for a moment, grounding himself. Mia let her shoulders fall for the first time in weeks, as if a weight she'd been carrying had been set down at last. The judge looked at Mia with gentle eyes. "You are very brave. Thank you for telling us the truth." She nodded shyly. After the hearing, the hallway outside felt different, lighter, like someone had opened a window no one realized was closed. Mia held Nolan's hand with one trembling palm and held Ilara's with the other. The three of them walked in a small, imperfect line. Not a family, not yet, but not strangers anymore either. Later that evening, they drove to a small house located on the edge of a quiet community center, one that the Hartley Foundation was days away from renovating into a support hub for families in need. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't large, but it was warm, full of promise, and for the first time in a long time, free of fear. The house was empty except for sunlight spilling across the old wooden floor. Dust danced in the beams, swirling gently with the movement of their footsteps. Mia tugged gently on Ilara's sleeve. "Is this ours?" Ilara kneeled to meet her daughter's eyes. "It can be, honey, if you want it to." Mia looked around shyly, then walked toward the small window overlooking a playground. "It's quiet." "Quiet is good," Nolan said gently. "Quiet gives you room to grow." Lily ran inside, next her backpack bouncing. "Can we sleep here?" "It smells like new beginnings," she announced proudly. Nolan snorted softly. New beginnings don't usually smell like fresh paint and old carpet, he teased, but sure. As the girls raced toward a bedroom to claim their space, Elara took a slow breath, turning to Nolan. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting her. Even from me when you had to." Nolan rubbed the back of his neck. "I just did what any decent man would do." "No," she whispered. "You did what a father would do." He looked away, emotion catching in his chest. "I'm not her father, but you were the one she trusted when the world fell apart," Elara said, voice soft but unwavering. "That counts for more than biology." The floor creaked as they stood side by side watching the girls run back and forth planning where to put their stuffed animals and who would get which bed. Elara slipped her wedding ring from her finger, something she hadn't done in years. She stared at it for a long moment, weighing memories, regrets, pain. Then she placed it gently into her coat pocket. A quiet declaration. A chapter ending. A new one beginning. Nolan saw it. Noticed the trembling exhale she tried to hide. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, offering silent strength the way he always had. Outside, sunlight broke through clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer clinked against metal construction beginning early for the new community center. Inside, Mia reached for both adults again, one hand for her mother, one hand for the man who saved her. 3 hearts, 1 home, a new story unfolding. But just as Nolan's chest warmed with hope, he noticed something, a shadow outside the window gone as quickly as it appeared. A reminder, peace had been won today. But the past wasn't finished with them yet. The months that followed didn't arrive with grand announcements or miracle breakthroughs. They arrived quietly like spring sunlight warming a cold window pane. Softly, gradually, steadily. And for the first time in a long time, life moved forward without fear dragging at its heels. At the newly renovated Hartley Community Center, mornings hummed with a gentle, hopeful rhythm. Laughter echoed down the freshly painted hallways. Sneakers squeaked across the gym floor. Children traded stories over paper cups of juice. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Nolan Brooks stood with a clipboard in hand trying to keep track of 12 energetic kids tugging brooms twice their size. "All right, team," he called out, his voice warm and teasing. "If the broom is taller than you are officially excused from sweeping. Try wiping down the mats instead. And no sword fighting with cleaning tools. Yes, Jonah, I'm talking to you." The room erupted in giggles. It was impossible not to smile. There was healing in routine and responsibility in learning to take care of a place that took care of you. Nolan had learned that truth years ago. Now he passed it on. He wore a simple t-shirt with the Hartley Foundation logo on the front, and the weight of his new role rested comfortably on his shoulders. Not as a janitor. Not anymore. But as the man who ran the center's youth support program, teaching life skills, offering safety, giving every child who walked through the doors something he'd once desperately needed. A place to belong. In the adjacent courtyard, sunlight filtered through the trees as 2 familiar figures chased each other around the small fountain. Mia, healthier, brighter, her laughter, feather light. And Lily, her partner in crime, her sister in all the ways that mattered. They ran until they were breathless, collapsing into a fit of giggles on the grass. No shadows followed them. No fear stiffened their shoulders. They were just kids now, messy, loud, free. Inside the main hall, Elara Hartley spoke with a group of volunteers, elegant as ever yet relaxed in a way no camera had ever captured. Her heels were replaced with simple flats. Her phone stayed tucked in her pocket. And when she glanced toward the courtyard window and saw Mia and Lily playing, her expression softened into something pure, unarmored, deeply human. On Saturdays, she helped Nolan host family cook nights, big pots of chili simmering on the stove. Warm bread rolls stacked in baskets, dozens of families gathered around folding tables. She chopped vegetables with her sleeves rolled up, laughing when Nolan teased her for never having peeled a carrot before. "You're improving," he'd say. Terribly, she'd correct, fighting a smile. But she was learning, just like he'd learned to open the door of his life again. just like Mia had learned to trust the world again. Healing wasn't a straight path. It was a loop, a circle, a hand reaching back to lift another. One chilly afternoon, as the sun dipped low and scattered gold across the wooden gym floor, Nolan noticed a woman standing uncertainly in the doorway. She was young, her shoulders tense, her hand gripping that of a small boy who hid behind her leg. The boy clutched a worn-out backpack and stared at the floor like the world might swallow him whole if he looked up. Nolan set his clipboard aside and approached them slowly with the kind of gentleness that came from understanding. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm Nolan. What's your name, buddy?" The boy peeked up a quick dart of scared eyes, then looked back down. The mother spoke instead. We heard this place helps kids. Her voice wavered. He's having a hard time. I don't know what to do." The air shifted around them, an old echo returning in a new form. Nolan knelt so his voice came from the boy's level, not above. "You're safe here, kiddo," he murmured, sincere and steady. "I promise." The boy's shoulders loosened just slightly. The mother let out a trembling breath of relief. Behind Nolan, footsteps approached. A soft hand rested on his shoulder. Ilara. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence said enough. We know this story. We lived it. And now we give back what was given to us. From the courtyard, Mia and Lily ran inside, cheeks flushed pink. Mia paused when she saw the frightened boy and took a few slow steps forward, her voice gentle. "It's okay," she told him. "I was scared too." The boy lifted his head. She smiled, a small, encouraging, shining smile. That was the moment Nolan felt it an ache so full, so overwhelming it nearly buckled him. Not sadness, not regret, but something deeper, gratitude. Because kindness was a circle, not a line. It found its way back. Always. Later that evening, after the families had gone home and the lights dimmed, Nolan walked the quiet halls turning off switches. The building smelled faintly of dinner and crayons and the sweet vanilla candle Ilara insisted on lighting near the entrance. As he closed up the last door, he saw Ilara standing outside with a cup of coffee, shoulders wrapped in a soft shawl. The sky was streaked with lavender and gold. "Long day," she murmured. "Good one," he corrected. They stood there listening to the wind move gently through the courtyard trees. "Mia's doing well," Ilara said after a moment, her voice full thick with emotion. "Therapy helps. Your routines help. You help." Nolan shook his head softly. "She did the hard part." "We all did," Ilara whispered. "Together." He looked at her, then really looked. Not as a billionaire, not as a woman shattered by guilt, but as someone who'd fought tooth and nail to rebuild a bridge to her child plank by plank, day by day. "You're a good mother," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. "And you," she said, stepping closer, "are the reason we found our way back." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of relief, of gratitude, of something blooming slow and steady like spring thawing an old winter. Inside the gym, Mia and Lily danced in circles, twirling to the faint notes of a piano someone had left playing in the background. Their laughter floated outside, warm and bright. Ilara tilted her head. "Sounds like joy. Sounds like home," Nolan murmured. She turned toward him, eyes luminous in the fading light. "Home," she echoed softly. "Yes, it does." The moment settled, the kind of moment that doesn't need a kiss or a confession to matter. The kind that roots itself deep, promising something real on the horizon. As the last bit of sunlight slipped behind the trees, the narrator inside the story seemed to speak not to the characters but to the listeners far beyond. Sometimes the thing that saves us isn't a miracle or a rescue. Sometimes it's simply a hand that stays when the world goes dark. A small act of kindness. A quiet promise. A stranger who refuses to walk away. And if you listened closely, the story asked one final gentle question. Who were you kind to today? And who might that kindness save tomorrow? As our story comes to a close tonight, I want to leave you with something gentle to carry in your heart. Because this tale wasn't just about a single dad or a frightened little girl or a mother learning how to love again. It was about something bigger, something all of us have felt at one time or another. The truth that kindness, even the smallest kind, has the power to reroute a life. Sometimes the world gives us storms we're not ready for. Sometimes we break in places no one can see. And sometimes a stranger steps in at just the right moment, not to fix everything, but simply to stay. And that changes everything. If tonight's story touched you, moved you, or reminded you of a moment when someone showed you unexpected kindness, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to share your own experience or something you witnessed in the comments below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs tonight. And before you go, tell me, where are you watching from? Every time I read a comment from a new city or a small town halfway across the world, it reminds me how connected we all are, no matter our backgrounds or our struggles. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the like button, and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next storytelling journey. Your support helps these stories find their way to others who might need a little light. Thank you truly for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself. Take care of one another, and remember, kindness always comes back around.